Ever wondered why some people deny the truth, even when it stares them right in the face? Let's travel back to a time when the one proclaimed to be the Messiah had just resurrected. An event so miraculous, so extraordinary, it should have sparked euphoria, but instead it was met with anger. The Jewish leaders, the elders, they denied the undeniable. And not just that, they pulled others into their vortex of denial too. They chose to stay rooted in their old thoughts rather than embracing the way, the truth, and the life. This version of the story, as the text tells us, has spread among the Jews till this day, the first century of our current era. But isn't it also reflective of our reality today? Theories are still being propagated. Theories that deny the truth of the resurrection of Jesus. The irony of it all is almost laughable. The very people who had warned Pontius Pilate about the disciples possibly stealing the body, those chief priests and Pharisees, they were the ones who demanded a seal on the stone and guards to watch the tomb. The precautions they took, they were responsible for, ended up confronting them with evidence they did not want to see. Perhaps without these measures, their doubt could have been justified. But now, they were faced with an unsettling conclusion about Jesus' body, and yet they refused to entertain anything that might challenge their worldview. The evidence for Jesus' resurrection was so compelling that it could only be questioned for two reasons. First, it was a highly unusual event, and second, accepting it meant a life-altering change. All of this was deeply unsettling. Accepting this new reality would irredeemably upset their position and influence. It would be the end of the life they had built for themselves. Believing in Jesus would be their death. So they tried another way. They continued to deny the truth. They chose to stay in their way of thinking, rather than embracing the way, the truth, and the life. The truth was there, but they chose to deny it, a choice that is not unfamiliar even in today's world. Irony often has a way of highlighting the absurdity of our actions, doesn't it? Imagine the scene. The Jewish leaders, so certain of their belief that Jesus was not the Messiah, demanded a seal and guards for his tomb. Ironically, these precautions, meant to prevent any foul play, ended up providing solid evidence for an event they were vehemently denying: Jesus' resurrection. They had hoped to find solace in the silence of the tomb, to quash the rising tide of belief in the Messiah's return. But their precautions backfired. The tomb was empty, the guards were speechless, and the seal was broken. This was not the work of mere mortals. This was divine intervention, a divine proclamation of the Messiah's triumph over death. Yet, despite the glaring evidence before them, the Jewish leaders turned a blind eye. They clung to their worldview, their preconceived notions about the Messiah. They were so entrenched in their beliefs that they refused to acknowledge the truth even when it stared them in the face. It's as if they had built a fortress around their minds, a fortress so impenetrable that no amount of evidence could breach it. The irony intensifies when we realize that their denial only strengthened the case for Jesus' resurrection. Their insistence on sealing the tomb and posting guards made it virtually impossible for anyone to tamper with Jesus' body. Their actions inadvertently validated the extraordinary event they were trying so hard to deny. Their denial was not born out of ignorance, but out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, and perhaps most importantly, fear of losing their power and influence. They were threatened by the prospect of a new order, a new reality, where they were no longer the ultimate authority. The irony here is a stark reminder of our own tendencies to deny uncomfortable truths. We often choose to ignore evidence that contradicts our beliefs, simply because it's easier to live in denial than to confront the truth and change our ways. The evidence was undeniable, yet they chose to look away. An unsettling choice indeed. What happens when accepting the truth demands a change in the way we live? This question takes us deep into the heart of the human condition and the fear of change. Imagine the Jewish leaders of the first century. They were respected, influential figures who had built a comfortable life for themselves within the framework of their religious beliefs. Then comes Jesus, performing miracles, speaking truths, and claiming to be the Messiah. If they accepted this, their world would be upended. Their position, their influence, their very way of life would be in jeopardy. It's easy to judge these leaders for their denial, but aren't we all a bit like them? Don't we all have a tendency to cling to the familiar, to the comfortable, to the status quo? Even when the truth is staring us in the face, we often choose to ignore it if accepting it means changing our lives in uncomfortable ways. Let's take a closer look at this fear of change. It's not just about losing status or influence. It's about losing what we know, what we're used to, what we understand. It's about stepping into the unknown, into uncertainty, into a new reality that may be better, but is definitely unfamiliar. This fear is so powerful that it can lead us to deny the truth, to ignore the evidence right in front of our eyes, to live in a state of self-imposed blindness. We see this in the Jewish leaders who denied Jesus as the Messiah. And we see it today in people who refuse to accept truths that would disrupt their worldview. But here's the thing, living in denial is not really living, it's hiding. It's avoiding. It's existing in a half-life of fear and falsehoods. The truth may be uncomfortable, it may be challenging, it may demand change, but it is also liberating. It is the path to a fully lived life. For them, accepting the truth was akin to death, a fear, it seems, that still prevails. Why do we sometimes prefer the comforting darkness over the liberating light? That's a question worth pondering. You see, we humans often find solace in the shadows, where our deeds and actions remain veiled. The darkness, in its enveloping obscurity, provides a safe haven where our imperfections, our missteps, and our indiscretions are hidden away from prying eyes. But why do we seek out this comfort, this refuge in darkness? Could it be that we fear the truth, the light that exposes all? The light is unflinching, it's revealing, it's absolute. It exposes our flaws, our shortcomings, our very human failings. To stand in the light is to stand naked, our truths laid bare for all to see. And this can be a terrifying prospect. Yet this fear of exposure of the truth can often lead us down a path of denial. This is not dissimilar to the Jewish leaders who denied the resurrection of Jesus. Faced with a truth that challenged their worldview, they chose to remain in the comforting darkness of their denial, rather than step into the unsettling light of a new reality. And so it is with many of us. We cling to the narratives that justify our actions, our beliefs, our very lives. We choose the comforting shadows over the harsh light of truth to protect the self-constructed narratives we've built our lives around. But here's the catch. While the darkness may hide our flaws, it also obscures our potential. It conceals the opportunities for growth, for change, for enlightenment. It keeps us cocooned in our comfort zones, away from the harsh realities and the liberating truths that could set us free. So we must ask ourselves, is the comfort of darkness truly worth it? Is it worth remaining in the shadows, our deeds hidden, our potential unrealized, just to avoid the discomfort of the light, the truth? In the face of a crumbling narrative, do we seek the truth or continue to clutch at straws? We all want to believe that our reality is solid, unshakable. But when confronted with facts that challenge our deeply held beliefs, we often find ourselves in a quandary. The fragility of self-justification becomes all too apparent. We start to see the cracks in our worldview, the inconsistencies in our narratives. Yet, instead of acknowledging these flaws, we often double down, clinging to our beliefs with even greater fervor. The thought of our world collapsing is simply too terrifying to contemplate. So, we construct elaborate defenses, desperately trying to hold together the pieces of a puzzle that's falling apart. We choose the comfort of familiar lies over the discomfort of unfamiliar truths. We choose the darkness of ignorance over the light of knowledge. The fear of a collapsed world often trumps the search for facts, a fear that is all too human. Are Christians more vulnerable to misinformation? A question we must ponder upon. You see, since that fateful Easter morning when the truth of the gospel was illuminated, there have been forces at work trying to obscure it, to muddy the waters. And these attempts aren't just historical relics. They persist today, in the form of conspiracy theories, unfounded rumors, and half-truths that spread like wildfire. Christians, like all people, are not immune to these influences. In fact, some might argue that believers, in their quest for understanding and their faith in the unseen, could be more susceptible to such deception. It's a paradox, isn't it? The very faith that is built on the foundation of truth could potentially make one more vulnerable to untruths. The battle against misinformation is one we all must fight. Let's continue this conversation in the next video. Remember to like and subscribe.